Et tous les jaloux, on va le rendre fou.
Well, thank you very much. I saw a few of us dancing to the tune. Thank you. He served in various academic and administrative capacities here at the University of Cape Coast, where he contributed to teaching, research, and translation studies courses throughout his career, shaping the next generation of bilingual professionals and scholars. In addition to his academic spans, narratology, Francophone literatures and civilizations, socio-criticism, and translation studies. At the Capacity Building Seminar on Translation,
Prof. Chair, Head of Department of French, distinguished professors here, distinguished guests. I don't know if you have any friends from the media, students, ladies and gentlemen. We have assembled here this morning to deliberate on the importance of translation and interpretation as strategic tools in the growth of organizations. We are at present tasked with dealing with the sub-team skill sets of bilingual employees. That is to say, the linguistic competence is expected of multilingual employees in the execution of their duties. Prof. Chair, permit me to freeze the topic as it's been given. The impression will be created that we are only interested in employees or colleagues who use languages in their day-to-day activities at the workplace. But I believe that what we are going to do here, the discourse is meant for all of us here. This is because we always find ourselves, consciously or unconsciously, translating. And so whatever we are going to discuss here will not be limited to employees, but then it will go for all of us in our various fields of endeavor. Now, before we get to the brass tacks, the meeting of chair, to determine an operational definition for translation to guide us in the discussion. So we come to the point, what really is translation? We find in the Encarta World English Dictionary that translation is a word, phrase, or version in another language that has a meaning equivalent to that of the original. Encarta continues to say that translation is the rendering of something written or spoken in one language, in words of a different language, to echo, for whom the act is a kind of negotiation. Translation is the version from a text A in a verbal language alpha into a text B in a verbal language beta. Translation is the byproduct of the act to translate, the verb from which we derive the noun translation, and which, according to Encarta once again, is defined as follows. To translate is to turn words into a different language, or to give an equivalent in another language for a particular word or phrase, or to reproduce a written or spoken text in a different language while retaining the original meaning. Translation is therefore the act of translating a text, either written or verbal, from one language into another language by means of relevant procedures while retaining the essence of the text. That's the meaning as clearly expressed in the original text. So when we make use of the word translation, just what do we mean? The term translation has several meanings. It can, for instance, refer to the general subject field. So when we are studying, we say translation, then that is the title we give to the subject. It is, again, the byproduct. That's a text that has been translated. Then it is also the process or the act of producing the translation, otherwise known as translation. The process of translation between two different languages involves the translator changing an original written text, that is the source text or ST, in the original verbal language, that is the source language or SL, into a written text, that is the target text or TT, in a different verbal language, which is the target language or TL. So this, in a way, is processes that the translation effort is supposed to go through. The nature of translation. Translation is elastic in nature and depends upon the person who does it. It differs from language to language and from culture to culture. It maintains its own uniqueness. That is its own identity. So it means that when we have a text and we are supposed to translate the text, then that's the version that we are given. It will be influenced by so many considerations. But at the end of the day, the translation text is supposed to reflect the original that we are supposed to have worked on. The word for word, which often results in mistranslation, has been the common approach that we adopt in translating. I remember what I overheard. I don't want to say that I eavesdropped on the conversation between a grandma and her daughter. The grandma had walked the little girl to the roadside and had seen that the girl crossed safely to the other side and continued on her way to school. Then the grandma called the girl's name and said, "Showing Nako." Then the girl said, "Huh?" Then the grandma felt obliged to translate. She said, "Look your front and go." I know obviously this is not what we will write or say, but at least it carries the message. Look your front and go. This reminds me about what I've been encountering in class. I got a text for students to work on. The title of the text was Kipoku Oresto. Some students were very smart. When they translated, they brought it back and said, "Kipoku at the restaurant." And I said, "Fine. But I wanted you to teach people." Because if you read the text, then it should give you the intent, whatever is intended in the title. And then some students said, "Well, misunderstanding." I said, "Oh, that's an attempt." a misunderstanding between which entity and which entity. Because I don't believe there can be misunderstanding when you're talking of one person. So some said, well, then probably is it confusion? I said, yeah, you're coming for. Because otherwise there is what for what in the restaurant. And then as we got into the text, we saw that the dilemma of the person who is talking is that all along he had assumed that he had a very good command of the English language. So he was on a journey in an English-speaking country. Everything appeared to go on well for him. Then in the night, when he got to the restaurant, that was where the problem started. Because he saw that all the food and drinks and everything had been labeled in English. And so when he was giving the name tag, he had a problem selecting. How was he going to point out the names of the different types of meat, different types of vegetables, different types of fruits? And that's the beginning of the dilemma. So I told students, now if you read through, you could easily pick the essence of the text, and it will help you to get the translation, the heading translated very well. We got to a point where in one of the classes we had this expression, but Michelle looks the picture of health. Then hands go up, the first translation. Michel regarde l'image de la santé. And we said, is there anything like l'image de la santé? Just what is it? What is the reality of image de la santé? So we brainstormed, and some students say, now look, Michel, this is good health. Fine, that is wonderful. Michel, je suis une santé reconnaissante. Michel supports Frida. Michel looks the picture of health. We have observed here that the word for word approach will not certainly succeed in the level. It can help us out of our challenges at certain given times, but we can't depend on it all the time. Types of translation. Roman Jacobson, in the seminal paper he produced, establishes the following categories of translation, which we have adopted for the purposes of this discussion, and I believe it's still also being considered when translation studies are tackled. The first one he has for us is what he calls intralingual translation, which is also at times rewording. So rewording of an interpretation, rewording an interpretation of verbal signs by means of other signs of the same language. So by intralingual translation, we can, for instance, want to take an example in Akan. Excuse me if I seem to be tilting so much towards Akan, because that's the language in which I am very perfect. Yes, I can't speak so much. But at least I will venture to begin with Ega. In a conversation between speakers, one of them told a colleague, oh, whenever I come with them, a colleague in shore. If there are some Ghana speakers here, I believe they understand what I'm saying. A colleague in shore. Indeed, if you get most Ghana speakers and you ask them to explain that, they won't be able to do it. But all what he said is that don't mind me. This one is not very efficient in the Ghana language. Ghana, the colleague is a stream that actually empties into the sea at Calling Lagoon. So if you say the Calling Lagoon does not flow into the sea, means your gun gets blocked somewhere. Your calling does not flow. We can also say, and permission to my elders in Akan here, if you tell someone that Odobranadefu, I don't see the harm in here, but I bet you, if you ever say this to a man, you may really have Odobranadefu. Literally translated that we only wheat it goes to the farm on Tuesdays. I don't know where the harm gets in here. But what it means literally is that person is impotent. So I believe if we get many of our people who are not too familiar with the language and we say this, they will ask for an explanation. Now, Jacobson gets the second one as interlingual translation. And this is what he calls translation proper. Because in this we move from one language into another. So this one we don't have much difficulty with it. Now he also has the third one, which he calls intersemiotic translation. That is also at times called transmutation. And this, we may translate symbols from probably a text into another text. We may have opera built out of music. If a drama built out of music, it may mean that we have interpreted the text which was originally in a musical form into now the showing form. I wonder whether we can do so probably in prose too. That is to be looked at later. Now, in the languages in which you are operating, the language A into the language B, you must first ensure accuracy and fidelity in the activity you are taking. You can't produce a translated version of a text and get everything warped up. It should be accurate. That means that the sense in the translation should be reflected in the worked text. That's in the translated text. The text should be sincere. Say fidelity. It should be sincere. It should not betray the original text. And then also, what I have come to find out is that if you translate probably, and then the translated version is about twice as long as the original, it means that you have not been faithful to the text. Conversely, if it is also shorter than the original, it means that you have not been faithful. It means that a lot of effort should go into translating the text. Then we talk of natural language and fluency. How you need to flow in the languages in which you are translating. There is the case where someone attended an interview, and when the person was asked what he intended to present, he said he was a good cook, so he was willing to tell the panel how to prepare a local meal, banku or apple as we call it. So now the first thing he did was to tell, so you get the corn and then and started estimating. So the panel member said, so you will soak it? He said, yes. So you let it stay in water for 3 days, and then you take it out and they take it to the mill for it to be. They say, what do you mean? They say, the mill, so you take it there for it, the corn to be. Grinder said yes, okay. So when you come back, then you put it in the big bowl, you put water into it, and then start distillation. It's not because the person attending the interview did not know how to, but the flow was simply not there. The language to do that was not there. Then context and purpose. Because the text is always cited in context. And it is incumbent upon the translator to let the content reflect in whatever they translate. In fact, if you depart from the purpose that the text is supposed to portray to carry, then it wouldn't have translated. There must also be consistency and clarity. Clarity, because what you put there should be read and understood. And tone of consistency. It means that you should stick strictly to the conventions of the language in which you are translating the text into. Is it about style? Is it about form? Is it about construction errors? Punctuation, you should show consistency. And at the end of it, there must be clarity. It gives room, therefore, it gives no room, therefore, for us. Because you see, most of the cases, people translate and they propose alternatives. So what you are saying is that it's either this or that. No. Translation doesn't have room for that. You should state clearly what you think of the text you have translated. We should also take cultural nuances into consideration, types of translation, and then the translation strategies involved. Cultural nuances, I wonder if we ask somebody to translate this simple thing. So he gave pegs to all the feelings in the book. It's in that translation book. Then he thinks he done well, so he gives pegs. Please, when you are going to translate and then you start by saying he cased, you know that you are going off. Because casing itself involves a more intimate thing. Now, in what you are trying to translate, is it about expressing intimacy or just showing all of the appreciation for the break that people have done? We need to be mindful of this. Now, all these things that we've been reading about translation, we know that translation has origins. How did translation come to us? We get to know that translation is a practice that goes back in recorded history. And its origins can be cited. For example, in the works of Cicero and Ulrich. We talk of this, then we talk of probably early century is it Latin scholars? I was going to say Italians, but I think Italian is much recent. Latin scholars who first started translating in the Bible, the Greek Bible. Indeed, Ulrich and Cicero, they made this effort in the first century BC. And St. Jerome, absolutely college, some call it Jerome, continued in the 4th century. St. Jerome, coincidentally, is considered as the patron saint of the activity that's what is here, translation and interpretation. Now, for a long time, this pioneering work had effect in Western Europe. And then it also informed the translation of the Bible that was taken much later by Martin Luther, and which actually continued during the Reformation into the 16th century. Translation has always become the battleground of conflicting ideologies. The way thoughts are shaped, the way approaches are presented in translation, always constitutes battlegrounds for ideologies. Until today, we still haven't got a clear-cut theory for translation, but at least we know that certain strategies and principles always help us to be able to translate. To do translation, we need preparation. And so there are tools, and then personal translations that we need. But we just want to give 3 of them for our purposes now. We need what we call the grammars. Grammar, English grammar, French grammar. If we get a kind grammar, whatever grammar, study the grammars very well. And look out for the rules and the conventions of usage in the various languages. Dictionaries, multilingual, monolingual, they are also essential. I do recommend dictionaries to my students and tell them, go and read the dictionary. They say, what do you mean reading the dictionary? And I tell them, you see, if you go into the dictionary, you will find out a lot of things. Don't let us really go into the bilingual dictionary. Let's work on the monolingual dictionary. So today, students really struggle over the use of the selection of 2 simple words, lose as a verb and lose as an adjective. So you will lose this much, and then we write lose with L-O-O-S-E. And I said, did you check? Do you know the meaning of what you have done? And they tell me, well, that's translation. I don't believe that translation allows us to use this word in that sense. And L-O-S-E hardly cross our mind. It's always lose. And the right goes to them. I ask students, this word, R-O-W, call it row. You see the students were arranging rows of 4. Which of these rows do we mean? Almost invariably. R-O-N-L-S. I said, go check your dictionary. Then the next row, I said, this same word, row, it has the same spelling, R-O-W. But now it is not row, it is a row. And it's say, take your dictionary, spend time with your dictionary, spend time with your grammars, read other materials of translation, texts and documents on socio-cultural issues. Just continue, always toss them out in your head. Okay, it also occurred to me that translators could be compared to the turbines of hydroelectric system that has to turn all the time for there to be power. It stops turning for a second and then there is darkness. For the translators to be able to do this, they need to inform themselves, they need to build themselves up. Because when they stop this, then there is trouble. The translator should be reminded, probably, of the adage of the fowl that starts all of a sudden to rest on one leg. And then other animals come and say, why are you not living this way? The answer of the fowl is that I am practicing this. Nobody can tell. Probably tomorrow, a king may come. Who orders that all my birds should stand on one leg? I believe this is a word for the potential translator and interpreter to chew Now, so we get here and then we ask ourselves, who is a translator? When we came here, we saw that we had limited that to employees. But then from the little discussions we've had so far, it can't just be limited to employees. Employees would mean that some people have been engaged on the basis of their knowledge in translation, probably the way they have showed that they are capable in working in two languages. But, ladies and gentlemen, I beg to differ from this opinion. We find ourselves consciously or unconsciously doing translation. At times, we are even blocked when we least expect it to go and do translation or interpreting. I remember myself that before I got into this, I was in my rural school teacher, just teaching my French. Then one day, I saw a young lady talking to my mother. And so my mother called and said, this young lady has come to see you. And when I put my head, I said, what can I do for you? She said, please, I want you to help me. What would the problem be? This is a young woman who spoke some level of English. But she's gotten herself into a relationship with a Francophone. And whenever the Francophone visits and gets back, immediately he has to send a message. He writes in French. And this is my lady who wants to know what her parable are waiting, but who hardly understood anything. So she said, please help me. You read whatever is in there. I felt reluctant. This is a matter between artists. What's my business here? But I had to do it because she wanted it. And you can imagine all the details. Some of them, well, we don't need to just delve into. But that's what you find yourself doing. One fine evening, I got back. I thought I was the only one doing a late afternoon lecture. It ended around 6:30 p.m. I got to the office and saw that there were lights in the rooms of many of my colleagues. I knocked on their doors, I didn't see any of them. I opened my door and I saw heaps of keys on my table. So what's the meaning of this? So I called the administrator. Are you choosing now to deposit keys of other colleagues in my office? I said, no. The police have actually, I don't know whether they were called or they were politely invited to come to the police station. What is the problem? The police have gone to arrest some miscreants, and all they spoke was French. And so immediately, they needed people to translate and interpret so they can make a case against the perceived miscreants. Ladies and gentlemen, this is what happened to us. We're talking of employees, bilingual employees. Bilingual employee, it may mean that it has some form of training, not necessarily professional training, because we still want to consider them as amateurs. But then, whether you have a translation or you haven't had a translation, it will happen when it will happen. And so you have to prepare for it. Have you imagined a situation in a church where a non-English speaker, I'm using English because many of us speak English here, a non-English speaker enters the church and wants to speak, and then they turn around and look for you. Probably a person speaks English. The congregation wants you to translate into the local language. Have you thought of that? So now we will always find ourselves in a way or the other, doing translation and then interpretation. At home we do it. Unconsciously we do it. See, you are there, and then someone comes and says, Dad, you say, Edison, which year we are? I said, my head is paining me. This is when they say, yes, try and discourage them. Your head is yours. If there are pains, you alone can feel them. So naturally, you won't say, my head is paining me. Just tell them to say, you have a headache. And so on and so forth. They can tell you in some other cases. But please, prepare for that. Now, how do we prepare for all this? I believe that the translator, as I said, is like a turbine at the hydroelectric system. So the translator should always be telling you, whatever you see, whatever you do, even when you are eating. I mentioned eating and people say, wow, the young ladies, I see that they are the dominant numbers here. When you go back and you take your preferred Cerelac, check just the writings on the container. You will see that you have at least 6 different translations. Compare them. Remember, we are not talking about a professional translator here. We are talking of potential translators. Take your time and read when you've taken your Cerelac. For us, distinguished gentlemen, we may want to have a sip of whiskey or brandy. When you have it, take your time. I know I was going to talk about my senior brother, Professor Humboldt, because I know that on a good day, you wouldn't mind a bottle of this dirty wine, that dirty bottle of wine. I observed that there are translations on that, and it is very, very, very wonderful. You should spend time even as you are consuming. So we have them on so many other products. Please take your time and read. I once just decided to get rid of a can of beer that has stayed in the refrigerator for a long time. Actually, I'm not a fan of canned beer. So I said, I was going to consume this. And one fine afternoon, when I was alone at home, I said, well, just let me treat myself to this before I see what I can eat. Now, after I consumed the beer, something said, just look on the can. And then I looked on the can and I thought I saw the most wonderful translation that I've been turning over and over in my head for now. The French then said, conduire en état d'ébriété diminue vos réflexes par l'alcool au volant. That's warning us, those of us who drive, not to combine drinking and driving. Conduire en état d'ébriété diminue vos réflexes par l'alcool au volant. Then I quickly went there and saw it. There were two, just English and French. The English translation. Then said, alcohol reduces driving ability. Do not drink and drive. I said, wow. If I didn't see the English version, I wonder how I would listen to translated probably as efficiently as what I saw. And this is probably where the Usman realm, but that's the translation I got. Spend time on it. I observed, Prof, that the dirty bottle has also come with a tag. And there's this translation on it. Probably we'll gather and give to friends. That's for them to read. Not to say that we'll share the contents of the bottle. And then for those of you, I know there are people with refined palates here. When you get your bottle of NDC, just check the translation. Or Remy Martin, check. Even the Johnny Walker, check. Now the question is, why is it that people are always now translating? It tells you that they want to expand their frontiers. They are not just interested in remaining dwelling on where their products are situated. I believe that we here, most of us, local boys and girls, Ghanaians, and probably even colleagues who have come from across our frontiers, will also take this thing seriously. But please and please again, before you do this, ensure that you know what you are about. I'm saying this because of a near shock I had. In one of my travels in France, and I like cooking, I'm a very good cook at that, and I prefer cooking for myself. I don't enjoy street food. So, as usual, well, I've gotten into my hobby. Now, I had a particular product that I picked from an Asian shop. Now, this day I got there, and then going through the products, I picked a particular one. So when I was going to pay, the shop owner said, "I know, that is someone you've been picking. Go back. I said, "You know something?" I said, "No." I said, "This is a product from my country." Indeed, I found a canned product from Ghana. And you can't imagine how happy I was. Now, when I got back home, scooped the contents, and my soup was boiling, so I said, "Now I have some time. Let me read." And this is a product from Ghana. For ethical reasons, I won't mention the product. But I saw that there had been an effort to translate. And it was there, going on, the contents, everything. But then, it got to a point where the product owner was trying to say that there were not preservatives in the content. And then what I saw, my translator friend put there, some preservative. I said, "God, preservative for the non-initiated in French means sheath. Sheath, what we call by Professor Safu Kantan as permission, French letter. And then, yes, I mean condom. So then the question I asked is, "Wow, what will condom be doing here?" Please, you may think that this is something that we can easily laugh over. But I bet my last first one that if the owner of the factory ever got to know that this was a translation that had been given to him or her, then the friend who did it would not last another day with the enterprise. Please let us watch this. And we know, we go around and we see so many of them. A dog breeder who wants a notice to be put up for him gets something like this. And because he is cast with the one who was made to write. And what came out of it is the man had all this for sale. The message there, bam. Dogs, children for sale. Boys and girls available. If you saw this, and it goes, it links into what we heard, people getting the translation of Shion Misha, Veteran's dog. It's a simple, you can saw here on top of the machine. The boy is in the train eating. And then it's not just in French and English. It goes on. Even in our Akan language. One of our friends who found himself helping to interpret the sermon of the preacher. And it's a preacher who had also had occasion to travel. He had been away for some time. And so he was telling the congregation of the itinerary where he had been to. So told them he was in the United States. And then the interpreter, some was saying, America for hey, for so. So I visited so many states, including Missouri, Ohio, and then Virginia. Now the interpreter was mentioning the names. Missouri, Ohio, Virginia, dead silence. Then the preacher man turned and said, I said I was in Virginia. Still dead silence. What the interpreter said was that to which the pastor is engaging in vulgarities. So I can no more explain what he's saying. And we've had, I hear somebody say, how? It is possible. It is possible. So these are some of the pitfalls that we should guard against before we decide to do the translation. I've said that my focus here is not just for us. We call ourselves employees, so it would have mean that we've had a kind of training. Not so much as to let us call ourselves professional translators and interpreters, but just for us to find our way about in our places of work. If it is about the place of work, remember you have been engaged for your competence. Competence that you actually displayed in being a bilingual or multilingual. Please hold yourself in readiness to properly leverage on this acquisition. Now, for us to be able to do this well, there are some innate skills that we need to acquire. Here we are able to list 3 of them. The first one is the linguistic skills. From what we have seen here, there's no gainsaying the fact that we need to be versatile in the language so that we'll be able to transmit the thoughts in the original text better. If we fall short of this, there will be mistranslation. I can't imagine the consequences. And I don't believe that any of us wishes that on ourselves. Linguistic skills. It must flow. Our writing ability should. Don't write and tell someone about this is translation. In one of our translation lessons, we got something like, but I remind you, the part 1C in there. Let us ensure that we prepare well and do the work well. It is our conviction that together we will heed to this admonishment to make translation play its useful role in the development of society and for its full impact to be felt. Ulrich, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, thank you, for I highly esteem your kind attention, and I want to thank you once again for giving me your listening ear. I say, I beg to you. I know there are some others. I saw my sister, Professor Alfred, and I just want to say, pray, Jeff. That is in Wolof. Papa, Professor Richard, and Professor Say Martin. Professor Samuel Kantaka, thank you very much for spending time with us. And then to all of us, and probably to our professionals, I say gracias. Thank you.
To be a bit more louder and warm. Such a beautiful review he's giving us this morning. So let me kindly indicate Dr. Anthony Kobler, Dr. Professor Kwakna Sabo Kantanka is Dean of the Faculty of Arts, University of Philippines. We say thank you. Let me also acknowledge Professor Mrs. Mavis, Director. Dr. Ulrich Douo is a French translator and lecturer, Department of French, University of Ghana, Legon. Thank you. Cote d'Ivoire. Mr. Senam Kumjuru. Yes, sir. And then to the General Secretary of GATI, Mr. Timothy Wotope, we say we are going to wrap up now. We'll have a photo session and then we'll break out for coffee. After that, we're going to reconvene.